Did you know that Mercedes used to be Tyrrell, then Bar and Honda, and later Braun GP, and then it became what it is today? Did you know that Aston Martin in Formula One, where Fernando Alonso races, used to be Jordan? Or that Red Bull used to be Stewart with Rubens Barrichello and John Magnussen? Well, several Formula One teams, even Ferrari, have interesting stories in their history. Ferrari, genealogically speaking, let's say, and that's what we're going to talk about today on Splash and Go. Let's go! First of all, just an explanation. Why did I decide to make this video? We've already seen online an illustration explaining that Ferrari started as Ferrari and is still Ferrari today. But I thought it was worth explaining a lot of interesting things that were going to happen over all these years, because Ferrari, for example, wasn't born Ferrari. So from the simplest to the most complex, let's go. And the first one, Haas is the youngest team in Formula One. The project started around 2014 to enter the video for the first time in 2016 at that time with drivers Romain Grosjean and Esteban Gutierrez. Gene Haas, the owner of the team that bears his surname, owns Haas Automation, a company with equipment for large factories, all involving automation and cutting-edge technology. In fact, several Formula One team factories have Haas equipment inside them. He already had previous involvement with motorsport, including a team in NASCAR, and then decided to take a step forward. And Haas is the first on the list because the simplest of them started with Haas. In 2016, it's been Haas until today, but Toyota is hovering around with a technical partnership that might at some point come and take control. Sauber has a long history, even longer if we consider the pre-Formula One period, because it started back in the 70s, making cars for Peter Sauber, its founder, to compete in hill climb races there in Switzerland. Peter moved up through the junior categories, always with cars named with the letter C for Christine, the initial of his wife's name. He then got involved with the World Sports Car Championship prototype, where in the late 80s he became a partner of Mercedes with the beautiful C9, C11, and C291, which even had Michael Schumacher behind the wheel. And it's around this time, when Group C is about to end, that Mercedes thinks, let's go to Formula One, and invites Peter Sauber, and they enter in the year 1993. A lean, very well-prepared organization starts scoring points with both cars right in the first races of that year. And Sauber could already request a song because over all these years it managed to work with the three major German manufacturers: Mercedes, BMW, when it was BMW Sauber in a partnership. And now, starting from 2026, it will be Audi. Peter Sauber was directly involved at the helm of the project until the mid-2010s, when then the team, already on the brink of bankruptcy, accepted the financial support of the Swedish billionaire Finn Rausen, owner of the packaging giant Tetra Pak. Rausen almost sold the company to Zandretti in 2021 and then agreed to relinquish the shares for Audi's arrival. This has been happening gradually, the name. It is still Sauber, but the team will then be Audi in 2026. In this journey, they have already had Mercedes engines at the beginning, then Ford Cosworth Ferrari under the name Petronas BMW, and after 2010, Ferrari again. But they were Alfa Romeo for a few years. So did you forget about that? No, I didn't forget, but the engine wasn't Alfa Romeo. Not a single screw made in Sauber's cars was from Alfa Romeo. It was a sponsorship agreement. The engines remained Ferrari and the car remained Sauber. Founded in 1979 by Giancarlo Minardi, Racing Bulls in the beginning, was the charming Anandi Faenza, the Minardi. Minardi itself was founded in 1979, but before that, Giancarlo had already had the Everest team, and before that, the Passatori team. I intend to tell this story in detail later on, possibly even in a book. In 1985, Giancarlo then began the project to enter Formula One. In 1986, he would enter and remain at the helm of the project until 2002. And drivers like Christian Fittipaldi, Fernando Alonso, Giancarlo Fisichella, Mark Webber would pass through there, with the team having scored in points, never having won a race, having led a lap with Pierre-Louis de Martini in 1989. But then when Formula One started to become very expensive with manufacturers pumping money into it, Minardi sold the team to the Australian aviation billionaire Paul Stoddard, who kept the name. But things in this format wouldn't last long, and Stoddard decided to step away at the end of 2005 and sold the team to Dietrich Mateschitz, where he would create his B team. Red Bull came in, and Toro Rosso would follow. Mateschitz did a huge favor for Bernie Ecclestone at the time by buying two teams that were on their way out, Jaguar, which became Red Bull. We'll talk about that later, and Minardi, which became Toro Rosso. From then on, and up to today, the team has changed its name twice, but it remains a marketing effort and a continuation of the main team's driver program, the energy drink manufacturer. Toro Rosso became AlphaTauri, a brand of the Red Bull Group. Last year, it was Nissan Visa, Cash, App, Vicarb, Toro Rosso as we called it here, and this year it will be Racing Booms. Alpine belongs to the Renault Group, but interestingly, it has nothing to do hockey with the Renault that raced in Formula One between 1977 and 1985 and was a pioneer in turbo engines, because that Renault raced on the same grid as the team that is indeed today's Alpine, Toleman. In 1985, Toleman, founded by Ted Toleman, a billionaire in the car transport business in Europe, it was sold to the Benetton Group, which would lead the project until the end of 2001. During this period, it would win 2 world championships, with Schumacher in 94 and 95 taking the 95 as a constructor. When the Benetton Group left, Renault came in, returned to F1, and took over the operation. It is this operation, and not the previous Renault, that is still around today. Renault, like Honda, enters and exits Formula One about twice per decade, and during this period, it won 2 championships in 2005 and 2006 with Fernando Alonso, threatened to leave, sold to the Genie Group, becoming Lotus Renault or Renault Lotus, as you prefer, and then decided to return in 2012. Since then, Renault has become Alpine, the sports division of the French manufacturer. Many people, myself included, bet that Fabriatore is leading a new sales process. However, until that happens, there's still time for Renault to change its mind a couple more times. Therefore, today's Alpine, where Jack Durham and Pierre Gasly race, assuming Durham lasts long, traces back to Toleman and Jerry Tonsena. McLaren, he still has, even as shareholders, the heirs of the Bruce McLaren, but along the way, the Formula One team merged with another. I'll explain, and one day I'll tell this complete story in Teams We Love McLaren. Scout's Honor, the team was founded in 1963 by the New Zealander Bruce, at a time when everyone was starting their own team. Jack Brabham, John Surtees, Bruce McLaren, Graham Hill, and later even the Fittipaldi brothers. When Bruce died in 1970, Teddy Meyer took over the operation and would carry it forward, even winning championships in 1974 with Emerson Fittipaldi, the team's first. But then in the late 70s, with the ship starting to take on water, Marlboro, led by John Hogan, teamed up with Ron Dennis, who had a Formula 2 team called Project 4, and merged McLaren with Project 4, from which the MP4 designation would emerge with a number. And McLaren, Project 4, and the car, over time, Teddy Meyer, it is pushed out. Ron Dennis and John Barnard buy his shares. Manso Roger, owner of TAC, Avant-Garde Technology, Patta joins the business as a partner, and McLaren would become a powerhouse, winning championships in the 80s and 90s, as we know. But Ron Dennis was not eternal. He was not eternal at the helm of the business, and then he is ousted by the partners after the failure of McLaren Honda Edition 2. Today, he no longer has any stake in the business. and the team has Zak Brown as CEO and a heavy investor, a fund from Bahrain. But as you can see, the family tree is not that simple. It started with McLaren, merged with Project 4, and then moved forward, changing parts. Williams is another team with an interesting history, having had more than one incarnation. Between 1966 and 1976, there was Frank Williams Racing Cars, which started with Frank buying cars from other manufacturers, Brabham and Marsh. He would put his stickers on them and race with his drivers. He always faced financial difficulties, and the story of him taking a watch off his wrist to pay a mechanic's salary is famous. In 1976, then, financially with his back against the wall, he sold 60% of the team's shares to oil businessman Walter Wolf. Frank would remain with the team without much decision-making power, acting as a front for the main team. When the 77 season comes around, he is dismissed by Walter Wolf, spends a few months at home depressed, and decides to try everything again and founds a new Williams. And here is an interesting detail about Walter Wolf, because the team after 2 years would close, and the remnants, let's say, of Wolf would be sold to the Fittipaldi team. Therefore, look at this twist of fate, or this fork in the history of Williams. A part of Williams, its first incarnation, let's say, became the Fittipaldi team. And only the second one, refounded in 78, 79, would become the team we know today. The Williams Grand Prix Engineering was born, which he would keep until 2020. With Patrick Hedges as a partner, we more or less know the story. They won several drivers and constructors championships and more than 100 races. 1:14 is the time of the recording of this video. But then, when the pandemic hits and already facing financial difficulties, Claire, his daughter, manages to build an agreement and sells the entirety of the team's shares for $140 million plus the debt to the American investment fund Dorito Capital, which has been trying to restructure the team and hired James Valls and is the one in charge of Williams to this day. And wisely they kept the name, because they know that this name carries a lot of weight. The Ferrari, it's one of those that you can look at in these charts and see a continuous line and think Ferrari is Ferrari, always has been Ferrari, always will be Ferrari, right? More or less. I've already told the entire story of Ferrari in our tetralogy. I invite you to watch 2 hours and 7 minutes of pure information and also some jokes, so you can know the whole trajectory of the team, at least until the end of 2022, which was when I recorded it. And when Hamilton's journey with Ferrari ends, maybe we'll have time to make an update, because something will have happened. Tragedy or triumph. Enzo Ferrari, first and foremost, tried to be a driver. When he realized there were people much better than him, for example, Tazio Nuvolari, he decided to switch sides and organize a racing team. He founded the Scuderia Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, a racing division of the Italian giant, which today has been absorbed by Ferrari, but at the time was much larger. In 1939, Enzo broke away from Alfa Romeo and went on to found Auto Avio Costruzione. This company would last until 1946, and he would create a new one, Ferrari SPA, which is a joint stock company, because Auto Avio Costruzione, let's say, had supported the wrong side in World War II. Thus, Ferrari, as we know it, was born today, or at least a part of it, the so-called, let's say, CMPJ. Remember that this is a great simplification, and I insist that you watch the Ferrari tetralogy. They would win the championship in Formula 1, 24 hours of Le Mans, but would always live in financial hardship. Enzo spent money without thinking to have the best cars, but he wasn't exactly a great administrator. They almost sold the team's control to Ford. They end up not doing it and remain in the hands of Italians when Fiat buys half. The agreement was that Fiat would pay the bill, place a trusted man of theirs in charge of the company, and Enzo would continue running the racing division, or the so-called Departo Corsa. In 1988, when the commander passes away in Modena, Fiat then takes over 90% of the shares, leaving 10% with the heir Piero Lage Ferrari, Enzo's only living son. In 2015, Fiat Chrysler decides to separate from Ferrari, and Ferrari becomes listed on the stock exchange, on the New York Stock Exchange, with the suggestive code RACE. And today it is predominantly controlled by the holding company 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙯 of the Agnelli family. The Red Bull we know today has a longer history than it seems, as it started in 1986 with Paul Stewart Racing. It was a team founded by Sir Jack for his son, Paul, to drive, and names like Gilles de Ferran have also been part of it. They raced in Formula Ford, Formula 3, Formula 3000, and Ford kept whispering in Sir Jack's ear, "Let's go to Formula 1, you manage, I'll finance it." When he finally agrees in 1997, he ends up doing a decent job, and in 1999 manages to win a race with Johnny Herbert at Nürburgring. In 2000, Ford decides to take full control of the operation and change the name to Jaguar, which at that time belonged to the Ford Group. And it would be their sports division, so to speak. It didn't work out at all. I cover this story in the video about manufacturers that failed. I recommend you watch it. And at the end of 2005, Jaguar ceases to exist, and the Red Bull Group takes over the team in 2006. Remember I told you that Mateschitz outsmarted 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙯 twice? Well, he also took over Jaguar. That's where the story of Red Bull began, under the same quote-unquote corporate identity offer that we know today. And the team would become a powerhouse, winning major championships for drivers and constructors. 4-4 with Vettel, 4-2 with Verstappen. At least until the time of recording this video, January 29, 2025. Mercedes was the Brawn GP, which was previously Honda's factory team. Look at Honda, which today powers Red Bull's cars in another rival team. Honda was Bar was, in turn, Tyrrell, which was acquired from Old Ken by BAT. The British-American Tobacco, a cigarette company, which wanted to have a team in Formula 1. And before that, Ken Tyrrell was allied with Matra. Look, where this story goes back to, in 1970, with Jackie Stewart at the wheel. The team existed from 1970 to 1998, becoming Bar in 1999. Remember that hideous car with the paint job? Half and half with a zipper in the middle. Ricardo Zonta and Jacques Villeneuve raced. The initial idea was to race with cars of different paint jobs. But Formula 1 said, no, this isn't Indy. You can't do that. The plan originally was to win a race in the first season using chassis made by Reynard. The team was Bar from 1999 to 2005, when Honda then came in. And in 2006, with Rubens Barrichello and Jenson Button, they became a factory team. When the 2008 crisis hit, Honda pulled the plug and announced, disappearing quickly, or as we would say, vanished. Ross Brawn, at that time the technical director, took on the challenge. The rest, as we know, is history. But they couldn't continue the story with the money they had on hand. And throughout 2009, he then negotiated with Mercedes, who was supplying engines, a deal to sell the team. Mercedes, deceived seeing what Brawn was doing, thought, saved more money, the team is winning. I will become a multi-champion in Formula 1 for a friendly price. So, no. Today we know Michael Schumacher and Ross Brawn were instrumental in the early construction of this organization, which only truly started winning in 2014. And there it is, to this day, winning 7 Drivers' Championships and 8 Constructors' Championships. I left it for the end. Here is the most diverse story, let's say, because today's Aston Martin was once Jordan from Formula 3, which collided with Ayrton Senna in that 83 championship. Senna, in this case, the Senna, not Ayrton Senna, did not appear in the documentary, by the way. Look, Eddie Jordan had a Formula 3 team that would later move up to Formula 3. Formula 3000 in 1991 would debut in Formula 1 with that beautiful 7-Up livery. The team, whose story I have already told in Teams We Love, would have its best moment. In 1999, winning 2 Grand Prix that year and reaching with Frenzing before competing in the championship. But from then on, it was only downhill. And in 2004, with his back against the wall, Eddie Jordan handed the team over to the Midland Group. That's why, in 2005, Jordan would still exist under the name Jordan Midland to not lose the Formula 1 money. In 2006, it was MF1. In 2007, it was sold to the Dutch supercar manufacturer Spyker, which stayed only 1 year, and then passed it on to the Indian billionaire Vijay Mallya, who would establish, on the same registration, Force India. Force India would continue under the same registration, following the same model of doing a lot with little money until 2018. When it went bankrupt, Vijay Mallya had an arrest warrant issued in his country, India, and Papa Stroll came and acquired the team, which would become Racing Point in 2019. They raced for 2 years with that name, and in 2021, Papa Stroll, who had acquired the supercar manufacturer Aston Martin, put the name on the hood and also on the factory's facade, and Aston Martin would return to Formula One. Aston Martin, which was in Formula One back in the 70s, but it was not the same team. Do you understand the reasoning? Just like the story of Alpine. This Aston Martin is not that Aston Martin, just as today's Alpine is not the Renault from the 70s. That's why this video was necessary and doesn't fit into an Instagram post. The explanation of all these comings and goings. Did you like the family tree of Formula One teams? I enjoyed telling it. I hope you enjoyed listening. This was another episode of Splash and Go on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like. It's free. It costs nothing, and it helps a lot. Do me a favor. Do us a favor in 2025. I also ask you to leave us your 𝘖𝙙𝙙𝙀, this new YouTube tool and its mysterious algorithm, to show them that you like the channel and the work. This way we continue spreading our content across the internet in search of 200,000 subscribers. At the time of recording this video, we have 192. No, case 192,000. If you want to receive notifications for each of our videos, and in the year 2024, there were 880 new contents posted here. We have Telegram and WhatsApp channels where you always receive an automatic message, and also a broadcast group on Instagram so you don't miss anything. In addition, the channel's social media accounts are being shown here: Instagram, Twitter, Threads, TikTok, and there's content all the time. The links are down below in the description. All right, so that's it. Thanks, and a big hug.